Hello, everybody! So as I promised, here's chapter 4 a whole lot sooner than, months in between. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody, and, I'm excited. Anyway, let's get right into it. Jinx's expression was stuck in her head. She couldn't stop hearing his screams. It was so awful. Durana was probably going to die. Someone else abruptly came into the room. Ben, wow! I really didn't think you were able to actually do what I said, a familiar voice chuckled. Robert? What are you doing here? Who let you in here? Benjamin spat. Then there was an annoying laugh. I lent my crew to you, Ben, and half of them are dead now. I think I get to see the thing that caused it, the man said gruffly. Durana glared and surfaced on the other side of the pool, the man who threw Benjamin into the water to drown. The snobby, gross human. The big man gave a disgusted look at Durana. Is this it? I had so many expectations. I hear some sirens have the power to turn into mighty hell beasts. And this one seems violent. Had she? He scoffed. No, Durana didn't hurt any of your men. It was a sea beast. But it's dead, Robert. And your men brought her here against orders, Benjamin growled. And you're not their commander, Ben, Robert said slyly. Durana flared her frill and hissed, but it was a lot quieter than usual. She couldn't get as loud as the others. She'd been crying. You lying, you little, Benjamin spat, but Robert shoved him into the deep pool. I'm going to be famous. I have a siren now. One that doesn't kill, so you say. Your job is done, Ben, and I don't need you anymore, Robert hissed. Durana yanked him down with her claws and hissed in his face. Her teeth loomed over his throat as she let out a lengthy hiss. But Robert still hit his fist against her head. She dragged him into the water while shoving Benjamin out of the pool. Her claws raked into his skin as he struggled under the water. Nobody is going to kill Jinx and get away with it, Durana barked, dragging him across the bottom of the pool and hitting his head against the wall. He thrashed around and made gurgling screams. Durana's whole neck rippled with pain, and she could feel blood leaking from her gills. The blood stained the pool, and Robert's lifeless body floated up at the top. Durana covered her face and tried to breathe. Proto wiggled his way to her cheek and onto her hand. I'm sorry, Durana whimpered, looking back at the body. I got mad. I didn't mean to kill him, she whispered. Her tears burned her eyes, and she curled up in the water. Benjamin's hand rubbed against her back for a second. Then he left the room. She killed somebody. Durana actually killed somebody. Her first kill. The only one. Lionfish and Jinx would have celebrated it with her. She still felt guilty. Even still, Jinx couldn't be there for her anymore. He was dead too, and Durana might as well have done it herself. After a few minutes, Durana pulled the man out of the water and used her siren magic to move the blood out as well. All sirens could do it, surely. Durana didn't think she'd ever use it, though. She hardly ever thought about it, controlling blood. But then Benjamin came back with a few other humans. They gave some weird looks at each other and then took the body away and wiped up the blood. Benjamin sat in front of Durana. She melted in guilt, keeping her eyes on him. I know what you were doing. He hurt your friend, and he was hurting me. I don't know if you're mad at me, Durana. I want you to know that it isn't what I wanted. This wasn't what I wanted, he said softly, offering his hand to her. What did he want her to do? Pull him in? Durana circled back and looked at him blankly. I thought you would be mad, so I guess we forgive each other? She said with a smile. They practiced on her human language. Trying to make the right sounds was hard. After a few hours, he left, leaving Durana in the dark, alone. 4 hours. Suddenly, an extremely terrified man threw in a raw fish for her. Durana smiled at him, but he yelped and ran away, closing the door. Durana got sad again. She cut off a few pieces and handed them to Proto first, making sure he ate what he wanted before she touched the fish. Durana hummed quietly, trying to think about the English lesson she had with Ben. The light snapped out, and Proto snuggled again to her frill. I guess we have to sleep, Durana whispered to him, curling up in the corner of the pool. Hello, Durana. Okay. Nice. Nice. Friend? Name? What? What? She softly repeated each word she learned, putting herself to sleep. Durana was startled awake by a noise of a rattling sound. She jumped a little and her horns hit the edge of the pool. Ouch! Shells and crabs! Durana squeaked, grabbing her head and sitting back up. The rattling sound turned into a bucket clanging to the floor. Was it the fearful human trying to give her food? Durana shook her head and rubbed her forehead before surfacing. It was the skittish man. Hello, Durana said softly. Then she noticed his bucket in her pool. The fish were there too, but she wasn't too worried about them. Hello, Durana said, more of a question, but the man only backed up further and whimpered. She circled the bucket and tapped it. It smelled like fish and other dead animals. Durana cooed and scraped a claw along the bottom. She definitely would not do that again. Durana looked at her reflection in the shiny bucket, opening and closing her frill to see if the reflection would follow. Her reflection was very silly compared to her real face. Durana stuck out her tongue, and the reflection made it look hilarious. She dropped the bucket and laughed a little, going under the bucket and hitting it out like she was playing with a ball. Then, Durana remembered that the man was probably still waiting for his bucket. Durana whacked it with her tail, and it clattered up onto the ground. Proto had snuck down and already started eating one of the fish. I hope the man and I become friends. I think he would be a fun friend, Durana whispered to Proto. The man still stood, petrified with fear. Durana tilted her head and wiggled closer to him, but he quickly fled as Durana reached a hand toward him. When her next meal was given, it was a different human. It made Durana super sad. Benjamin came back a while later, and they practiced more on the English language. I won't hurt you. Benjamin. Fish. Eat. No. Yes. Thank you. You? Durana repeated things over and over. Benjamin told her that he was teaching her the most important things first, and Durana definitely agreed that they should. After all the necessary words were taught, Benjamin taught her some of his favorite words. Durana chased Proto around for fun when Benjamin wasn't there, and even the skittish man returned to give her food. Hello, I won't hurt you, okay? She said warmly, hoping that he wouldn't run. He looked surprised, but still completely terrified. Again, Durana was given food and left alone. Benjamin didn't let that last long, though. Ben, the Queen wants to speak with you, a man said abruptly. Queen? Durana asked. She's like the chief, in a way, Benjamin stammered. Durana nodded. She knew that when the chief called for someone, they never really came back. It was scary. But Benjamin looked thrilled. Oh, Proto, how is he gonna get me home? She whimpered, swishing around the water. It was a pretty decent-sized pool of water, about the size of her bedroom now that she thought about it. Proto was swimming around in the pool while Durana took a nap. She really didn't like sleeping. It just felt weird. What if humans were watching her while she slept? Would they try to wake her up? What if they took Proto away and tried to eat him? But what else was there to do? She woke up in an empty room, and it was just her and Proto. Durana yawned wide as the door opened, but she didn't mind the yelp of the human as they saw her teeth. She stretched a little and reached out a hand for Proto to grab on. The human was trembling and held a bucket with 2 fish in it. "Hello," Durana said in their language. He jumped back a little and threw 1 fish. The fish fell on the floor. "Oops, that's okay," Durana giggled, reaching for the fish the same time he did. Their hands bumped into each other, and he jumped back and dropped the bucket. "Oh, thank you," Durana said warmly. It was a tuna and a trout, her 2 favorites. The man whimpered and picked up the bucket. You're welcome," he stuttered. Durana smiled and watched him leave the room quickly. He finally said something to her. Next time she would ask him for his name, that's for sure. Before he closed the door, another person bumped in. Durana gave the trout to Proto so that he could eat what he wanted. And she was about to take a bite from the tuna when she noticed the human staring at her. It was a girl. She had very fancy clothes, but not a dress like she'd seen other human girls wear. The clothes looked like Benjamin's almost. Adventurous. Hello? Durana asked anxiously. She didn't say anything and just watched with a blank expression. Was she going to hurt Durana? And that is where we're leaving off. That is all of Chapter 4 and eventually Chapter 5. And if you are liking it, you can tell me. And that'll be all.
Goodbye.